There's a single word that separates the people who build the life of their dreams from the people who spend their whole life wishing for one, and that word is discipline. Not motivation, not talent, not luck. Discipline. It's not exciting. It doesn't trend on social media. Nobody makes a highlight reel out of showing up on a boring Tuesday when they didn't feel like it. But if you study every person who has ever built something meaningful, a business, a body, a marriage, a fortune, a legacy, you will find the same quiet ingredient underneath all of it. And that is the willingness to do what needs to be done, especially when they didn't feel like doing it. Today, we're going to break down exactly what discipline really is, why so many people misunderstand it, and the simple formula that once you understand it, changes absolutely everything about how you move through life. And if you're serious about becoming someone who follows through instead of someone who just intends to, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now, because what we're about to walk through together could genuinely change the direction of your life if we let it sink in. Let's start by clearing up a myth, because this myth alone has ruined more good intentions than almost anything else. Most people think discipline is about willpower. They think disciplined people simply have more of some internal resource that lets them resist temptation, push through pain, and stay focused when everyone else gives up. And because they believe this, when they fail to follow through on something, they conclude that they simply don't have what it takes. They tell themselves, I'm just not a disciplined person. As if discipline were a trait you're either born with or you're not, like eye color or height. But here's the truth, and it's a liberating one. Discipline is not a personality trait. Discipline is a skill. And like every skill, it can be built, strengthened, and mastered by anyone willing to practice it, regardless of how undisciplined they've been up until this exact moment. The moment you understand that discipline is trainable rather than innate, you stop waiting to become the kind of person who has discipline, and you start becoming that person through repetition, the same way you'd build any other skill. Now let's talk about why willpower alone will always fail you if that's all you're relying on. Willpower is like a muscle, and just like a muscle, it gets tired throughout the day. Every decision you make, what to wear, what to eat, how to respond to an annoying email, whether to hit snooze one more time, draws from the same limited well of mental energy. By the time evening rolls around, after a full day of decisions, most people's willpower is nearly empty, which is exactly why so many diets fall apart at 9 at night. Why so many people who swore they'd work on their side business after dinner end up on the sofa instead. Why so many arguments happen in the evening when both people are simply too depleted to communicate with patience. If your entire plan for building discipline depends on having enough willpower in the moment, you are setting yourself up to fail, not because you're weak, but because you're human. And every human's willpower runs out. The people who seem to have endless discipline aren't relying on willpower at all. They've built something far more reliable. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next. The real formula for discipline isn't about gritting your teeth and forcing yourself through sheer determination every single day. The real formula is built on 4 things working together. And once you understand each piece, you'll see why so many people struggle even when they genuinely want to change. The first piece is clarity. The second piece is identity. The third piece is systems. And the fourth piece is what I call the recovery principle. Let's walk through each one, because together they form something far more powerful than willpower ever could be. Let's start with clarity, because without it, nothing else in this formula works. Most people who fail to follow through on their goals don't actually fail because they lack discipline. They fail because they were never truly clear on what they wanted or why they wanted it in the first place. Think about how most people set goals. I want to get healthier. I want to make more money. I want to be more successful. These statements feel meaningful in the moment, but they're far too vague to actually direct behavior. Your mind cannot execute a plan around a fuzzy target. It needs something concrete to aim at. I want to get healthier becomes powerful only when it turns into something. Like I will walk 30 minutes every morning before checking my phone, and I will stop eating after 8 at night. Suddenly there's a clear action, a clear time, and a clear boundary. Discipline isn't the ability to force yourself to do something vague. Discipline is the natural result of having something so clear that showing up simply becomes the obvious next step. If you find yourself constantly struggling to follow through on a goal, the very first question to ask isn't, why am I so undisciplined? The first question should be, is this goal actually clear enough for my mind to act on? 9 times out of 10, that's where the real problem is hiding. Now let's talk about the second piece, which might be the most overlooked piece of the entire formula, and that's identity. Here's something almost nobody tells you about: lasting change. Most people try to change their behavior first, hoping that eventually their identity will catch up. They tell themselves, I'm going to run every day, and they hope that eventually they'll become a runner. But this approach fights against human psychology instead of working with it. The people who build lasting discipline flip this order completely. They decide first who they want to become, and then they let their daily actions become evidence of that identity. Instead of, I'm trying to exercise more, they tell themselves, I am someone who takes care of their body. Instead of, I'm trying to save some money, they tell themselves, I am someone who is building wealth for my family's future. This shift feels small, almost like a technicality, but it changes everything about how decisions get made in the moment. When you skip a workout and you see yourself as someone trying to exercise more, skipping it doesn't threaten anything. It's just one missed session among many attempts. But when you see yourself as someone who takes care of their body, skipping that workout creates a kind of internal friction because it contradicts who you've decided you are. Every action either becomes a vote for the identity you want or a vote against it. And the more votes you cast for the identity you're building, the more that identity becomes true, not just in your mind, but in your actual life. Let's move to the third piece of the formula. And this is where most people finally understand why relying on motivation alone was always destined to fail. This piece is systems. Motivation is unreliable by nature. It ebbs and flows depending on your mood, your sleep, your stress levels, even the weather. If your plan for discipline depends on feeling motivated every single day, you're building your entire future on the most unstable foundation available to you. Systems solve this problem completely, because a system doesn't ask how you feel. A system simply runs. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't wake up every morning debating whether you feel motivated to brush your teeth. It's not a decision anymore. It's a system, something so deeply built into your routine that it happens automatically regardless of your mood. This is exactly what the most disciplined people have done with the habits that matter most to them. They haven't relied on motivation to write, to exercise, to study, to save money. They built systems so specific and so automatic that the behavior happens whether they feel like it or not. A system might look like this. Instead of, I'll exercise when I have time, it becomes, I exercise every day at 6:30 in the morning before I check my phone in my living room for 20 minutes, no matter what. Notice how specific that is. There's a time, there's a place, there's a duration, there's a trigger. This is the difference between a wish and a system. And it's the difference between the 95% who intend to change and the 5% who actually do. Now let's talk about the fourth and final piece of the formula. And honestly, this might be the piece that changes the most lives once people truly understand it, because it removes the shame that usually kills discipline before it has a chance to take root. This piece is the recovery principle. Here is something nobody tells you when you're starting out. You are going to miss days. You are going to have moments of weakness. You are going to eat the thing you told yourself you wouldn't eat. Skip the workout you promised yourself you'd do. Sleep in past the alarm you set with the best intentions. the night before, this is not a sign that you're broken or that discipline simply isn't for you. This is simply what it means to be a human being, attempting to build something new. The people who eventually succeed are not the people who never slip. They are the people who have built a plan for what happens after they slip. The 95% treat a single missed day as proof that the whole effort has failed. And so they quit entirely, turning one missed workout into a completely abandoned goal. The 5% understand that one missed day is just one missed day, and the entire game is simply getting back to the FICE system as quickly as possible, without turning a single slip into a spiral. There's a principle worth remembering here. Never miss twice in a row. Missing once is human. Missing twice is the beginning of a new, unwanted habit forming in the shadow of the old one. If you internalize nothing else from today, internalize this, because it will save you from quitting on yourself 1,000 times over the course of your life. Now that we understand the 4 pieces: clarity, identity, systems, and recovery, let's talk about why discipline matters so much more than people realize. Because I don't want you to think this is just about waking up early or hitting the gym. Discipline touches every single area of a person's life. And the quality of your discipline in one area tends to bleed into every other area as well. Think about your relationships. The couples who build lasting, healthy marriages aren't the ones who never feel like being kind to each other. They're the ones who have decided, regardless of mood, to show up with patience, to communicate honestly even when it's uncomfortable, to invest time and attention even during the busy seasons of life. That's discipline, quietly at work, in a place most people never think to look for it. Think about your finances. The people who retire with real financial freedom weren't necessarily the highest earners. They were the ones who built the discipline to save and invest consistently, month after month, decade after decade, regardless of what the market was doing or how tempting it was to spend on something else instead. Think about your mind and your emotional health. The people who remain calm under pressure, who don't explode at every inconvenience, who can sit with discomfort without needing to escape into distraction. They've built the discipline of emotional regulation, often through years of quiet practice that nobody ever saw happen. Let's talk about something Jim Rohn spoke about that still holds true today: the idea that discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. You can have the most brilliant goals in the world. You can have talent that would make anyone jealous. You can have every advantage handed to you on a silver platter. But without discipline, none of it matters. Because discipline is the mechanism that actually moves you from where you are to where you want to be. It's not the flashy part of success. Nobody writes songs about discipline. Nobody puts discipline on a motivational poster with a sunset in the background. But every single accomplishment you've ever admired in another person, whether it's a body they built, a business they scaled, a skill they mastered, was carried on the back of discipline, quietly, day after day, long before anyone was paying attention. Let me paint 2 pictures for you, because I think this will make the entire formula click in a way that's hard to forget. Picture the first person. They wake up and immediately decide, based purely on how they feel in that moment, whether today is a day they'll exercise, eat well, work on their goals, or be patient with the people they love. On the days they feel motivated, they do great. On the days they don't, and let's be honest, most days start out feeling a little heavy, a little tired, a little uninspired. They let themselves off the hook. Over a year, this creates a life full of stops and starts, good intentions that never quite compound into anything, because consistency was never actually built. Now picture the second person. They've decided who they want to become. Someone healthy, someone financially secure, someone patient and present with their family. They've built simple, specific systems around that identity. A morning routine, a savings plan, a habit of checking in with loved ones without distraction. On the days they feel motivated, they follow the system. On the days they don't feel motivated at all, they still follow the system, because the system was never built to depend on motivation in the first place. And when they slip, which they will, because they're human, they simply return to the system the very next day without turning it into a crisis. Over a year, this person has built quiet, compounding momentum in every important area of their life, not because they were more talented or more motivated than the first person, but because they understood the actual formula behind discipline, instead of relying on willpower and hoping for the best. Now, here's something worth sitting with for a moment, because it explains why so many people who genuinely want to change keep finding themselves stuck in the same place year after year. Most people try to change too many things at once. They decide on January 1st that this is the year they'll wake up early, eat perfectly, exercise daily, read constantly, save aggressively, and completely transform their career, all starting on the same Monday. This feels inspiring in the moment, but it's actually a recipe for burnout, because willpower, as we talked about earlier, is a limited resource, and spreading it across 6 massive changes at once guarantees that most of them will collapse within a few weeks. The people who actually build lasting discipline understand something counterintuitive. They start absurdly small. They build one system, master it, until it becomes nearly automatic. And only then do they add the next one. This feels frustratingly slow in the beginning, and that's exactly why most people skip this step. But a small habit, mastered and made automatic, becomes a foundation you can build the next habit on top of, whereas 6 habits, started at once, all fighting for the same limited willpower, usually collapse into 0 habits within a month. Let's talk about something that quietly destroys discipline in millions of people without them ever realizing it's happening. And that's the environment they've built around themselves. Discipline is far easier to maintain when your environment supports the person you're trying to become, and far harder to maintain when your environment is constantly working against you. If you're trying to eat healthier, but your kitchen is stocked with junk food, you're not lacking willpower. You're fighting a battle against your own environment multiple times a day, and eventually you'll lose. Not because you're weak, but because nobody wins that battle forever. If you're trying to focus on building a business, but your phone buzzes with notifications every few minutes, you're not lacking discipline. You're constantly interrupting your own progress by the very tools sitting in your pocket. The most disciplined people you know have often done something quieter and smarter than simply gritting their teeth harder than everyone else. They've engineered their environment to make the right choice, the easy choice, and the wrong choice, the hard choice. They've removed the junk food from the house entirely. They've put their phone in another room while they work. They've automated their savings so the money moves before they even see it in their account and get tempted to spend it. This is discipline working smarter, not just harder. And it's available to every single person watching this video right now. Now let's talk about time, because time is where discipline either compounds into something extraordinary or quietly leaks away into nothing. Here's something worth understanding deeply. The results of disciplined action are almost never visible in the short term. And this is exactly why so many people quit right before the breakthrough would have arrived. Someone starts a new habit, sticks with it for 2 or 3 weeks, sees no dramatic change, and concludes it isn't working. But real transformation in your body, your finances, your relationships, your skills almost always follows a pattern where very little seems to be happening for a long stretch of time, and then suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, everything shifts at once. This is because discipline compounds. Small deposits, invisible for months, quietly build on top of each other until they reach a tipping point. And once that tipping point arrives, the results that once felt impossible become undeniable. The tragedy is that most people quit during the invisible part, the long, unglamorous middle stretch where nothing seems to be changing, right before the compounding would have finally become visible. If you take nothing else from today, understand this: the middle of any discipline journey always feels like it isn't working That feeling is not information about whether you should quit. It's simply the price of admission for the results waiting on the other side. Let's talk about failure for a moment, because how a person relates to their own slip-ups says everything about whether discipline will eventually become a permanent part of who they are. The 95% treat every failure as a verdict on their character. They skip one workout and think, I guess I'm just not disciplined. They overspend 1 month and think, I'll never be good with money. Each small failure gets turned into a permanent identity. And once that identity takes hold, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because people naturally act in ways that match the story they've decided is true about themselves. The 5% treat failure completely differently. A skipped workout is just a skipped workout, not a referendum on their entire character. An overspent month is simply information to adjust the plan, not proof that they're doomed to a life of financial struggle. This distinction matters more than almost anything else we've discussed today, because the story you tell yourself about your own slip-ups will either keep you stuck in shame or quietly move you forward with the very next action. Now, let's bring all of this together, because I want you to walk away from this video with something you can actually use, not just something that sounded inspiring for a few minutes and then faded by tomorrow morning. Discipline is not a trait some people are born with and others aren't. Discipline is a skill built through clarity about exactly what you're doing and why. An identity you deliberately choose and reinforce through your daily actions. Systems specific enough that they don't depend on how motivated you feel on any given day. And a recovery principle that keeps a single slip from turning into a completely abandoned goal. Willpower will always run out. Motivation will always come and go with the weather of your mood. But a formula like this, built once and refined over time, becomes something far more reliable than either of those things ever could be. So here's what I want you to do, starting today, not next Monday, not after the holidays, not when things finally settle down, because things never really settle down. Today, choose one area of your life where you know discipline has been missing. Get painfully clear on exactly what the action looks like, when it happens, where it happens, and how long it takes. Decide who you're becoming by doing this action. Not what you're trying to achieve, but who you're becoming through the doing of it. Build the smallest possible version of the system. Something so easy, you'd feel almost silly not doing it. And promise yourself right now, before you even begin, that when you slip, and you will slip, you will simply return to the system the very next day without turning it into a reason to quit. Entirely. That's the entire formula. It's not glamorous. It won't trend on anyone's feed, but it is exactly what quietly built every single life you've ever admired from a distance and wondered how they managed to do it. Remember, the people who reached the highest levels of success in any area of life were never the most naturally gifted people in the room. They were the ones who understood that discipline isn't about waiting to feel ready. It's about building a formula so solid that readiness stops being a requirement at all. If this video gave you something to think about today, something you can actually carry with you into tomorrow morning, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because we've got so much more of this journey ahead of us, and I don't want you to miss a single part of it. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And until next time, keep building, keep showing up, and remember, the formula that changes everything was never complicated. It was simply waiting for you to be willing to practice it.